Hey folks, you're listening to the Java Easily podcast, episode number 17.
Java Easy. News, tutorials, tips. Everything you need to know as a beginner Java developer.
Hi there, welcome back to the podcast. But listen, before we get started, if you're new to Java and need a helping hand, you can go grab our free starter kit. Just go to javaeasily.com and you'll be able to go grab it over there. It's completely free and it gets you up and running with Java in the quickest way possible. Anyway, let's jump into the episode now. So in last week's episode, in episode 16, we spoke about the mindset perspective of when you have a fear of getting started. The title of the episode was How to Fix Your Mindset to Get Coding Quickly, but really what this was about was the fear of getting started, which people have, and I wanted to give you kind of like a take on the mindset side, just to give you kind of like a mindset reset to be able to just kind of spur you into action with a healthier frame of mind going forwards. Now, following on from this fear of getting started, mindset perspective, we can now shift gears and go to the practical perspective. So in this episode, we're going to look at how to start coding Java, even if you don't know where to begin, and give some practical tips for how to just get stuck in and start coding with Java. Now, the biggest takeaway for this episode, normally I kind of break things down into a few points, but this episode can really just be summarized as just start, no matter how small. It really can be as simple as that. If the fear of doing something is preventing you taking action, then the way to kill that fear, ironically, is just to do that action. So you've just got to start, no matter how small. If you have this idea of becoming a Java developer, getting a career in IT, I'm really speaking to those people now who haven't really made a proper start yet into getting started, but they know they want to have or to embark upon a career in software engineering. Yeah, it can be daunting. Anything new is daunting. Everything is difficult before it becomes easy. Everything seems like a problem before it suddenly, you suddenly find that things slot into place and you realize something's actually pretty straightforward. That's true of anything in life. You have to get started though. If you don't get started, if you don't take the first actions, then you're never going to get anywhere. Now, I appreciate that Java technology might seem a bit daunting to get up and running with initially. So for example, when I teach Java, there's a few things that you have to do. You have to download the JDK, that's the Java Development Kit. You have to download an IDE, and you have to set up environment variables such that any subsequent Java tooling you use will be able to find that JDK that you've configured. Now, even doing that, even those 3 steps, for me as a professional Java developer, it's the first thing you do when you start a new project and you're setting up your development environment for the first time at a company. So at this point now, I can kind of do that, in the quickest possible time. I don't even have to think about it. But yeah, when you're starting out, that is not straightforward. And it can seem kind of daunting. It's like, I want to get started with Java, I want to start programming, but I have to download this thing called the JDK, I have to work out which JDK to download, I have to download the IDE and get the right version for that. Then I've got to make sure that this thing called an environment variable set, I'm not sure what an environment variable is, but I'll just kind of like follow some tutorials and try and figure it out, I guess. And that can take like 2 or 3 days for somebody who's a beginner. And you might get to the point where you're trying to set up environment variables and think, do you know what, forget it. This is just too complex. And we've all been there with these kind of things, We've all had these kind of issues. But you know what as well? These things don't go away. Ultimately, if you want to be a professional Java developer, you have to do those 3 things first of all. However, that's if you're doing professional Java development in a company. If you're just learning, though, for the first time, you kind of casually have come across Java and you just want to try out a few things without having to have this huge kind of upfront investment of, I've got to download the JDK, I've got to download the IDE, I've got to set these environment variables, then there are other alternatives, okay? So, for example, there are online Java compilers. So if I do a search now on Google for online Java compiler, there are a few here. jdoodle.com has one. I'll open this one out in a new tab. W3 Schools, they have one as well. I'll open that one. And there's another one, online-java.com. I'll open that one. So now I've got 3 tabs open, for example. You can't see it because it's a podcast episode, obviously, but I have 3 tabs open. And in the first one, JDoodle, if I click execute on the code that's already there, yep, it executes the program. No problem, it's just adding 2 numbers together. If I go to the next one on W3 Schools, excellent website, by the way, not just for Java, but for any form of web development, tech learning in general. But if I click run here, again, the code's executed, and now I'll try online-java.com, click run, it takes a few seconds, and here I can see that it's run as well. So this is great. The barrier to entry for just typing in, for example, online-java.com and typing in some Java code is very, very, very minimal. If you just want to try some things out, just to see how it might work or what kind of compilation errors you might get, just to see what the kind of syntax is like, how the coding looks and everything, you could do that literally in the next 30 seconds. So if the barrier to entry is, or rather the barrier to even trying Java out as a language, is not wanting to do these 3 things, then just look up online Java compilers and just have a bit of a play. You know, following on from last week's advice, you just got to get started, no matter how small. And if it's literally opening up a URL in a browser and just typing out a few bits of Java or whatever, or having a bit of a play or adapting the existing code that's there, just do that. There's no investment whatsoever. Time-wise, nor complexity-wise, it's just very straightforward to do that. So yeah, if IDE installation is an issue, forget it, just use an online compiler. Now once you have that, and you've had a bit of a play around, that might give you enough kind of goodwill towards Java in the bank, or enough of a kind of a baseline reassurance that, hey, I might actually be able to do this coding thing, it doesn't look too difficult after all, then at that point, that goodwill you've got in the bank there, that would spur you on to do the main points of downloading a JDK and downloading an IDE. And then when you create some code in the IDE, that opens up a whole load of different features to you then, which are going to help you out coding. Things like showing pop-ups of the different methods or properties that are on objects, that kind of thing. Syntax highlighting, it'll show you the errors you're making, it'll suggest autocorrections and all that kind of good stuff. And we saw that a few episodes ago about the features that IDEs give you. And at this point, you can just really start typing stuff in and just seeing what works. You know, type stuff in, try it out, see what works. And if you don't know what to type in, you can just Google some stuff. I mean, really, you probably think that professional Java developers know every single aspect of the entire language and know about every single library and every single method in the library and everything. And here's the secret. We don't know that. Seriously. We know a fair amount of stuff. We have a very good body of knowledge to be able to be professional Java developers. But that knowledge isn't an encyclopedic, information bank of every single method, every single property, every single library. That would be impossible. You just can't do that. No, the knowledge we have is gathered through experience, and it's basically about knowing the typical ways of how libraries and frameworks are developed, paradigms behind them, how they run, the concepts behind them, and knowing about all these different software engineering concepts in general enough such that we can then take any new piece of technology or any new library that we haven't seen before or whatever and be able to get up and running with it very, very quickly. It's almost like a piano player, for example. You know, a pianist doesn't know every single song that was ever written, but they do have a working knowledge of the keyboard. They know about, how to place their fingers. They know about different types of scales, chords, chord progressions, all that kind of stuff. And they know enough to be able to pick a song they haven't seen before, or rather they haven't played before, just see the chords that are in that song and be able to just improvise and play that song they haven't seen before in a relatively straightforward way. It's that similar kind of concept. So never be shy to use Google because, frankly, we do it all the time. We use Google, we use stackoverflow.com, and we'll kind of tap into how other people have solved things before because, why wouldn't you do that? If I don't know, for example, how to integrate a library into my application to do a specific thing, then I'm not just going to sit there and feel bad about it and try and read every single technical document from scratch on that particular topic. It's much easier to look up the solution on Google, read a few threads about people who have tried to do something similar, and then given that kind of context now, given those sort of past learnings of those people, you can then assimilate that knowledge, throw something into the IDE, some snippets of Java code that you see, start stepping through it, and start seeing if that works. Now, there's a bit of a caveat to this. If it's just an integration of a library, that's a good approach. That can be a good, quick, get you up and running approach. But also, as a professional Java developer, I do actually read the proper technical documentation. And also, not just the technical documentation, but I also step into the actual code of the library to find out what's going on. So I'd only really throw things into an IDE off of the web where it's something that I literally have never done before, and it's just kind of like a nice way of being able to kind of stand on the shoulders of somebody who's had a bit of a play with the library beforehand to be able to shape that code and form it and mold it into something that's my own, that does what it's supposed to do for the task at hand, and it can kind of act as a mechanism of me being able to learn that technology. Now, what tends to happen is you'll do that and you'll find it doesn't work. And then when it doesn't work, you'll go back to the documentation, you'll have a reread of that, and then you'll start to notice things like, oh, it's this particular version, it's not this version, it's this other version, I've got to make this change here, and then you'll start kind of gradually refining the code as to where it wants to be. But my point here is that for you as a new Java developer is don't be afraid to just throw things into the IDE and try them out. Now, the other thing is just start typing stuff in and seeing what works. That can be even copy pasting stuff in from things that you see on Google. So, for example, you can Google for Java tutorials and copy and paste little bits in to the IDE and just see how they work. Just have a play with them, see how they work, and you can try and build things up like that. You can even try building up, in fact, a program completely from scratch just by copying and pasting different snippets that you come across on the web into your IDE and just trying to get them to work together. Now, when you do this, you're going to come across errors. So the other point about just starting and just getting on with things, is the fact that you have to reframe these errors, right? So when you get a compilation error or an error of any nature, or maybe you have a syntax error and you've got the red underlined thing in an IDE showing you that you've got it wrong, don't feel bad about that. It's just feedback. So don't think of errors as being a negative thing, kind of a negative hit on you as a programmer, because you're just learning to become a programmer. So don't beat yourself up about it and don't be hard on yourself about it. Just know that it's feedback. The universe is giving you some feedback, and it's this feedback that's going to lead you to become a better programmer. Because what's going to happen is you're then going to go off, have a look on Google, copy and paste that particular error message you get, for example, into Google, read about it, understand what it means, that kind of thing. Then apply the fix that's suggested. Maybe the IDE suggests that. Maybe it's a fix that you see during your travels on Google and looking up what this problem is. And then once it's fixed and it's gone away, you're going to feel good about it. And when you feel good about it, and when you fixed it, two things happen. One is you feel good about that, which is great. You feel a sense of empowerment, which is good. That's going to fuel you on to keep you going. And the second thing is that the next time you see that type of problem, that type of error, you're going to then have the experience to know how to fix it, which means it'll no longer be a problem for you. And that's all experience is, really. It's just, continually coming across problems, having errors, having issues, resolving them, learning how to fix them, doing a bit of research to be able to do that, and in doing so, elevating yourself to a higher level of competence with whatever you're doing. And as long as you keep going and keep reframing these errors and keep doing this progress, you'll be fine. So to recap, you just got to get started. No matter how small, you just need to get started. If you're procrastinating from getting started with Java, just roll your sleeves up, just get started. If the tool installation stuff's an issue for you, just use some online compilers to get started. That'll give you enough juice, as it were, to be able to then put the time in to install the JDK and set the IDE up properly. Then just start typing stuff out, throwing stuff in, seeing what works, having a bit of a play, having an experiment, seeing what works. And then as you're going along and you're encountering errors, just reframe those errors. It's just feedback. Don't worry about things. Just copy the error message into Google, understand what it means, apply the fix that they're suggesting, and just rinse and repeat. And in doing this, before too long, you'll actually find that you've got a pretty good understanding of how things work, and you'll be well on the way to learning Java and coding in Java properly. So that's about it for today. I hope that's been useful. All that remains to say is have a great day, happy coding, have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.